Hello, everybody. My name is Jenny McFarland. I'm the bird conservation biologist for Tucson Audubon Society. This is just sort of a little orientation on what's involved in entering data for the Arizona Important Bird Areas program. I also have Taylor Rubin here, who's a volunteer coordinator for Tucson Audubon, who's going to say a little bit at the end about general volunteer stuff, including how to enter your volunteer hours, because entering hours for volunteers is actually incredibly helpful and important for Tucson Audubon, and it really helps with our grant tracking and shows how impactful our programs are in a larger sense. So it's really very important. So Taylor's going to kindly has joined us to cover that. So I am going to share my screen. Okay, so can you guys see that okay? So what we're talking about is the Arizona Important Bird Areas program. So it has its own website. If you go to www.aziba.org, you get this general website that is statewide. So because the Arizona IBA program involves two Audubons, so it's a very collaborative program. So within Arizona, it's Tucson Audubon and Audubon Southwest that run IBA, Arizona IBA. And then nationwide, it's run by the National Audubon Society. And then globally, it's run by BirdLife International. So it's like 170 different countries that participate. It's a very collaborative, sort of a large scale conservation program. And so because of that, the Arizona one, rather than have just a section of the Tucson Audubon website that is about Arizona IBA, it has its own website because there's just so many partners involved. So when you go to aziba.org, you have this really nice looking, WordPress template webpage. It's got all sorts of stuff. So it's got like profiles of the different IBAs. So if you're ever curious about where, what are the 48 important bird areas of Arizona, each of them here has their own little profile with maps and keybirds. And then we have conservation resources where we've been developing products for conservation. So we have like landowner habitat improvement guides, as well as these IBA mini conservation plans that are meant for like land managers so for instance, like a biologist with the Coronado National Forest, it's recommendations or information from us on what are the key birds for the Santa Rita Mountains IBA and what are top priorities, that kind of thing. So it's sort of resources for bird conservation. Then we have this tab that's just it's used a lot, the survey resources, and this is for the volunteers who are helping with bird surveys. So you can get a sense of the different species specific work we do sometimes, as well as we have sort of general standard protocol forms. But we do elf-owl surveys and elegant trilobite surveys and cuckoo surveys and all sorts of different types of survey efforts. So we use this page also to coordinate that. So each of these bird survey efforts has their own page with protocol downloads and information and sort of coordinating surveys, which is pretty cool. But what we're going to be talking about is this database tab. So when you click on the database tab, it does go to a WordPress page, but any of the links from this page are going to take us to the custom HTML written database interface. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Access, but how this generally is working is there is a computer, it's a server, an actual server computer that lives in the Tucson Audubon Nature Fair. And that server communicates with the outside world through our network. So when the network was down, it wasn't working, but wasn't communicating with the outside world. And this web page is the portal at which it does it. So all the data lives in an Access database. It's like an old school Microsoft database program. All the data lives in an Access database, but what we're going to do right here is a user-friendly web interface to that database. So it's always beige like this. It's beige colored. You're in the right place when it's beige colored. And this was sort of a custom made web interface. So what I clicked on there, any of them will do it. But what I clicked was this one I have as the most helpful query. So parts of this internal system are available to anybody. So queries like what birds were seen at, let's do a cool one. Pennsylvania Mountains, all sites, and I'm not putting any bracket dates to generate a report, it's pulling from the database this data. So then it's like in 2012, we did an expedition up there, and this is the birds we got. So anybody can access this part. This is not password protected. But what is password protected is when you start doing data entry, because we don't want, just anybody going in there and putting in data. So the query part, anybody can go into. So that's kind of cool, actually. And we do make that available to partners and land managers. And it's a lot of data. When I was checking out the database recently, each bird entry, so, zone-tail hawk 1, band-tail pigeon 2, each line of bird data, there's 250,000 lines of data in our database. So it's a pretty big database, which is really pretty cool. But doing entry, so this is divided. This menu on the left here is the main sort of menu for anything that happens on this database interface. And this blue stuff, data entry, has data entry heading, and then these blue links are all things that have to do with data entry, and all this is password protected. But everything below, survey location, query reports, and green, these are ones that anyone can view without a password. So if you ever want to share that with anybody in terms of showing data for an area or whatever, that is totally fine. We encourage people to go in here and see what birds we have in our database. And if anything's sensitive, we obfuscate that sort of ourselves. We don't put coordinates or anything in for eagles and stuff. But well, we have a lot out here, like very low water range, all these surveys that happen. But it's this data entry that we're going to talk about. So what happens is people go out and do bird surveys. So I have a little sample here of data sheets. Okay. So this is what the data sheets look like that we give to volunteers who are doing the actual bird surveys. So we do a lot of different types of surveys. We do some that don't use forms like this at all. We do some that are really species specific, like the Trogon survey, where it has its very own, very specific data form just for the Trogon survey about, okay, this was your canyon, what are the coordinates of where you found Trogons? This database is not so much for that kind of data, it's for our data, it's for our survey routes that are all bird species, where people are going to a specific point count location or transect and recording all the species they detect within a set amount of time or a set amount of distance. So the reason we don't just use eBird, which we do for some things, like when people are out there doing the Trogon surveys and they're focusing on Trogons, I do have them keep sort of a day list on eBird and then just share that with us. And it does give us some nice background information on what other species they had, gives us sort of a total species count for the overall survey, etc. But what these surveys are, what I need help with, are surveys that are much more specific and sort of like disciplined in their protocol in terms of reporting all the birds they see in here. So all of our surveys, anytime someone's out there doing a bird survey, they're supposed to do one of these all species sort of IBA, transect, or point count surveys. They should be doing a universal cover sheet where they're putting in the survey location. And this is a sample one I put together back in the day, where with the date, the names of the people who were there, the name of the area they're surveying, the transect or like series of point counts or something. They can record weather. People often neglect to do this, which means we just leave it blank when we enter it. We really should only be entering what they write. So if they leave stuff blank, for the most part, we just leave it blank as well. I do go through all data forms before I give them to data entry volunteers and make changes as needed. Assumptions that I feel like are safe, I'll do in a red pen. Do it in a red pen so we know it was me, not it was us, data people after the fact, not people on the survey who made those marks. So do data, and then they can do site comments. So like here's an example site comment I did. Light rain during survey, after rain ended, lots of bird activity. Okay, so then light rain was captured in the data as well for the precipitation, the LR for light rain. So these codes, often we try to give as many clues on the data form itself to make sure stuff gets written down correctly. So for precipitation, we lay out the codes here, D for drizzle, F for fog, etc. So that's a cover sheet. Those should always be at the top of the packet. And this is an example of someone doing a transect survey. So they're supposed to write again the name of the route in case the pages get separated. They're supposed to number their pages. So 1 of 6. We'll put the date again, at least on the top one. And some of this information, like truncation distance, often gets not filled in. But the route and the date should always be there, as well as page numbers. So then they start putting their birds down. They start the survey and they're recording their birds. You're recording bird data. It's very common to use 4-letter code. These are standardized. I do have a document of them that I'll share with you guys. They're also in some of the apps, so like the Sibley app and what is it? It's the iBird app, I think. Does show the 4-letter code for species, and they're pretty standard. So Suta is summer tanager. So if it's a 2-word name, it tends to take the first 2 letters of the first word and the first letters of the second word. So it's U for summer, TA for tanager. That's how many of them work. We want to but if they're not sure of the code, I do encourage people. I train bird survey volunteers specifically. If you're not positive on the code, don't just guess. Put more letters in there. So Swain Hawk, because it's like, oh, I don't know what Swainson's hawk code is. Then put Swain Hawk. You're not sure what violet green swallows are, but do VG swallows. That makes it a lot easier for us when we do data entry later to know what the heck they're talking about. Because if they get the 4-letter code wrong, it can be it's a bit of a brain teaser sometimes trying to figure out, and I often can. It's one of my favorite games, but it's tricky sometimes to know for sure what the heck they meant if they get a 4-letter code and it's not correct. So then this is another example. Here's a point count. This looks very similar. We have the birds coming down. These are just some samples I did for bird data collector volunteers. All right, so this is what the data forms look like generally. And what happens when we have a packet of this? Let's say we have this cover sheet and this text. So I just want to sort of show you the procedure of how data entry works to see if it's something that you're interested in doing. So the database interface definitely reflects the structure of an Access database. It doesn't look at all like an Access database. This is much more friendly looking and easier to use. But the logic of it is the same as Access. If you've ever used Access to keep track of data, it has this really smooth logic, but it's very sort of logical. It only does exactly, it only knows what you tell it, and it only does exactly what you tell it to do. So we have this organized in a series of steps. So, and they go in order. So this main survey data entry edit, pick that first. Now you have to log in, and we'll give everyone their own unique login. Look at my login there. We do have people log in. So our example was Verde River. Okay. So location of surveys. So how this works is just like the data form. The way the data form had survey location and then like transect name or site. Data should present site. We're going to go to a general location, which is Verde River, and then a site. So when you do this upper pull down of different locations, so as locations like the Santa Maria Mountains versus the San Pedro River can have many survey locations within each of those sites. So you tell it first, okay, which general location are you talking about? Verde River Greenway, and then it will then the next pull down then customizes for that first one. So if I do a different one, like Harshart Creek, and then different surveys show up. So when we have built this all in the back end where different survey routes are associated with different locations. So you pick the location first, and then the ones that are affiliated with it will be the only ones that pop up. So everything here is really pretty logical and meant to sort of prevent confusion and problems. So if you go to Verde River Greenway, which is our example, and what was the name of the site? It was South River Transect 1 in this example. So there we go, Transect 1. Okay. And you can see here then it has, we already have put into the database the truncation distance and the habitats. I don't know why the cover sheet asks for that because it's already in there, but so most people never fill it out because there's no place to enter it here anyway. It's kind of I need to take it off that cover sheet, so I need to get So then number of observers, it asks, let's go to our sheet. Number of observers was two people. So 2 people. The date, remember it was 2016. 9/8/2016. I think it's when we went up and did that training. 9/8/2016. Start time. Let's translate here. Yes, it's 8 to 10:30. It's 8 a.m. 30. So you start putting in the information that they are telling you. Now I'm going to put a comment here as test. So it's for, or say example data entry. So I'll go delete this later. It's going to be kind of a bogus. Okay, so example data entry. So once you have this first step of main survey data entry, the information in there, you hit save survey record and it saves it. And it confirms that for you by now showing it below. Now the system knows, because we logged in, it knows that it is my profile entering this data. And what I mean by why that's important is if say, Lori, you've entered a bunch of survey data for this Verde River Greenway, all of your transects that are all those surveys you have started will show up here. But then if I were to go in and enter one, yours won't show for me. It only shows you the ones you've entered, which is good. It stops people from accidentally, changing other people's entry. So it knows. So obviously I've never entered any for Verde River Greenway because it's showing me just one entry down here. But I do know that some of my other volunteers have entered a lot of data for this site. So if Jill, who's done a bunch for this site, had logged in, 15 surveys would show up in this table. This is the first one I've done, it's showing up here. So once you've done that and it's confirmed for you nicely that it did indeed log it, it's gone in, you then go to the next step. So up here on these blue links, you go to enter, edit, observers, and weather. Now we're going to enter the people, the observers. So you go back to, you have to tell it, it doesn't assume. The database does not assume things. You have to tell it everything, which is good in a way. It's not going to just assume it's female. You got to tell it everything. So we're going to tell it, okay, it's Verde River Greenway again. And it's like, oh yeah, you, Jenny, you entered this one survey for Verde River Greenway. And then you have to select it. And it makes it very obvious that it's been selected by making it bright yellow. It's like, yes, this survey is what I'm now talking about in the database. Everything I tell you now is going to be affiliated with that survey. And that's a thing of access, that access works in these sort of almost like a network where, okay, it's like in levels. So we made our top level, we made a survey. Okay, cool. For that survey, who were the people there? And it links them together. It uses ID codes, which luckily we don't have to look at on this interface, but that's how Access is doing it internally. It makes ID codes for everything, including the name of the survey, that particular survey event. And then as you start entering birds in, each of those bird logs gets their own ID code. So it's linking different identifying numbers together, and it's really strong. It's what everyone uses Access, or many people use Access for so long. It's incredibly stable and strong and logical. So that's why we have to do this step of telling it, yes, that survey multiple times, because it's linking them together. Okay, so we told it, yes, this one I just entered, Verde River Greenway T1 on September 8th, it has already assigned it a number. We didn't have to do anything. It auto assigned it a number, which means if you ever have to refer to anything as a data entry, that something weird happened with this record, knowing this record number is hugely helpful to me to find out what happened if I go and look into the actual database. So, okay, yep, we're talking about this survey. I'm going to pick some people here. So what I've done for all of these is sometimes the system's kind of weird where you have to like preload in people for different routes. So if a person's not on the list as they should be, so like on my sample survey, I had just sort of as like an example, I put myself and Tice, who's the co-runner of the program, in as the observers, but we're not affiliated with the survey because we actually were doing those surveys up in Verde Valley. That was people who lived in the area. But so in that case, I added unknown person to everybody so that you could always just tell me, oh, the person wasn't there, so I put unknown person. Anyway, that's why I put that in all of them. So I'm going to do that, unknown person. But normally, 90% of the time, it would be like Jim Logan's name on there, would be the one on there, or one of the names on this list. Since we, at the beginning of setting up a survey, affiliate the people with the survey. So then if they recorded weather, you can enter it here. So we have weather, so 8 o'clock, it was 60. 1N. So at 8 o'clock, temperature was 60, the wind was 1, clouds was 1, precipitation was none. You hit insert, it shows up. So we changed this for the better in the last couple of years, where showing the confirmation 9:56. I like these little tables that show up now and show you exactly what was going on, or what it has logged. This is really very helpful. Okay, so 0, 3 light rain, 0, cloud 0, 3, and there was some light rain in this example. So we're gonna hit insert, and then again it shows it. Now you also see there's blue links here, so I can edit it. If I'm like, oh wait, no, I know who it wasn't, that person, it was this person. It lets you update it and change it. So it doesn't seem to be doing that. And then edit lets you change it. I say, oh no, I didn't mean 0, I meant 1. And it says it. So that's pretty nice that that's also a new improvement over the last 5 years. So once you've done this, there's like 3 main steps of doing data entry. You have to do that first step, fire up this main survey data entry. So that's where was the survey, what date was it, basically, and what route did they do. And then this next one that we just did of enter, edit, observers, and weather. Okay, cool. So now we're ready to enter our data. So looking at the data forms here, this example data form, it is a transect survey. If a transect survey means you're walking around and recording all the birds you're seeing here within like 50 meters of them. So, and so this third step, there's several options, and depending on what type of survey they did is the one you're going to pick. So most of them are this: enter data for transect area search, something on casuals. And I feel like we did this pretty good job explaining itself. Oh no, it's a point count survey. I need to enter data for point counts. I need to enter data for census, whatever type of survey it is, which it very supposed to say pretty, it says in a pretty large type font at the top, it's the transect survey, or this is a point count survey. The reason they're different on the data, the reason there's different links for these different types of surveys is because the data forms are asking for slightly different things. So because of that, we had to build the interfaces differently. So there's a custom interface for each of these survey types. So a transect wants to know audio, visual, both, total count, and then distance 0 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 150. A point count is very, very similar, but asks slightly different questions. One, both is not an option. Audio, visual, you're not supposed to put both on a point count. Since on a point count, you're supposed to record how you first detected the bird, which is not the case in a transect. And some of these rules seem so fiddly, but they're so standard across, all sorts of organizations and survey efforts. And for some reason, point counts always you record how you first detected the bird. And I think MSB have to do a statistical analysis, but anyway, but they are different. So because they're different is why we have these different links on the database to enter it. So for this one though, we're going to do a transect. So all right, so we're assuming there's now we need to enter data for a transect area search supplemental. Okay. So we're going to go to back. You have to tell it again. It doesn't assume like, yeah, Birdie River, and say, oh, this, yeah, that one. And this has, if I were entering 10 different surveys for the Birdie River, like a crew had gone out there and done multiple transects, different people or whatever. Like they often happen. Just send teams out and they'll do a couple transects. 2 people will go do that transect, 2 different people go do that one all on the same morning. When that happens, this list will start to get kind of long. It'll start to build on itself as you enter more and more. But the newest one is always at the top, which is helpful. And then, of course, it does display the date and time, which can also help you make sure, and the name of the route helps you make sure you're getting the right one. So, okay, yeah, this is the one. You need to enter some birds for the survey. So I've selected it. So I turn orange, so it's indicating to you it understands this one. Now, if you forget to select one, which I wonder how I can back up. If I were to start trying to enter birds and I haven't selected one, it will error. It's like, no, you must select the survey. So there are sort of safeties built in to prevent you from making sort of obvious mistakes. And it's happened to me a lot. All right, so what's our first bird? Let's go back to the data form. Summer tanager, visual 2, 0 to 50. A male and a female. It's a pair. Okay. Summer tanager. You can scroll through and find your bird if you'd like. That is one way to do it. But this is a lot of birds. It's all the birds in Arizona pretty much are in this list. So what works really well is to start to type the name of the bird. So it is sort of type, sticky key sensitive. So you get Suta and it pops. You can see it popped up right there at the top. Suta. So because I typed it, now if I just start typing, if I don't know what the code is, like they didn't write the code, they wrote summer tanager, I'm like, I don't know what the code is. We just start typing SU, it gets you close. If you do SUM, yeah, it's starting to type summer, and it's still going summer tanager. Okay, so if I type summer, and you gotta do it kind of fast. I have like a 3-second sort of refresh period, which is good. If you typed it wrong, you don't have to wait very long before it refreshes. But you can get the hang of it when you're doing data entry, and I did a lot of data entry when I first started working at this one. All the new biologists do spend tons of time doing data entry. And boy, does this get fast. And so you can do it with the mouse a lot. I think it was visual, wasn't it? It was visual too. I might have to print it out in front of me, it'd be a little easier, but 0 to 50 meters, scroll down, 1 male, 1 female. They were a territorial pair, so you can click on the breeding behavior. They were. All right. Everything's in there. It's good. We're gonna hit insert, and it shows. So it confirms with you that it got it by displaying it below. So now we go to the next bird. The next bird is Wilson's warbler. Wilson's warbler, visual 1, 0 to 50. It's a male. Now I'm going to do this with once I click on the pull down, I'm going to do this with no mouse. All right, so I'm going to do wild turkey. There we go. Wilson's warbler. Enter on the keyboard. And if you hit tab, it goes to the next one. So I haven't touched the mouse yet. So it was a visual. I hit V, hit tab, 1, tab, and then from here, we'll usually use the mouse. So 0 to 50, and it's a male, 1. So you can get pretty quick with keys going. The more you do it, if you're comfortable using sort of key command, they're simple commands. Tab to the next one, enter to select. Now it's in, and hit insert, and it goes in. Okay, so let's do the next bird. Nice and top, visual 10, and there's supplemental. This is sort of meant to be sort of a brief orientation showing what we're doing, but supplementals are treated differently. When we do our training, I'll explain that. This would not go into this list. Supplemental doesn't go into this list. So we're going to skip these two for now. That's why I put them in there. They're a good example because they're like too far away. So the survey is supposed to be within 150 meters. It's like a sample of space. So within 150 meters of your transafe route, they're supposed to be recording all the birds that are in that sample. And if birds are outside of it, and they're interesting, they can still record them, but they're extras. Supplementals get entered differently. So we're going to skip those for now. But VG swallows are in 50 to 100. They have 15 swallows, and they're estimating the number of birds. So we got to VG, of course, being violet green swallows. So GSW, violet ground swallow, violet green swallow, number good visual. There's 15 estimated. So the form and this web page are pretty much almost entirely match. There's a few weird exceptions, but they pretty much match entirely, which makes it really helpful when you're trying to enter data. So 50 to 100, they didn't record any male or female because they just can't tell with violet green swallows if they're male or female. So if they don't know, they don't put it in there. And they didn't have any habitat, but there was this note of them aerial foraging. Let me show you. So on here, it had a note. FA foraging aerial. So these swallows are swooping around and feeding. So we're going to put that in the comment here. Again, it shows us that it's done it. Now, you notice there's now it's giving us also, it's assigning a code to each of these bird sightings. So there's the site survey, and these are all the same because these are all associated with the same survey. But each bird entry affiliated with that site has its own unique ID as well. So if you ever need me to change anything, or you're trying to be like, something weird happened with this, or I have no idea what they wrote on this one, that's a way to tell me exactly which record you're talking about. It does label them. Now, we don't have links here to edit species. So you can, we just made it a little bit more intentional. You can go to edit species records on these links. You can go back to Verde River, where we were, Verde River Wildlife Area. Oh no, that's not the right one. It's Verde River Greenway. Verde River Greenway. All right, here's my sample one. Select. Shows me the 3 birds we just entered, and from here I can edit them. So I think we did that so it wasn't quite so to make it so people didn't accidentally edit something. So you have to actually hit edit, and then you go, oh no, it wasn't Violet Green Swallow, it was something else. So that's how you can change it. Or like, no, I see, I typed in, it's not 15, it's 50 or something like that. You can then make that change yourself, hit update or cancel, and cancel just goes back to the way it was. So there's a lot of self-editing possible, which is great. This didn't used to be in here. It made it it was a lot more difficult. It was more difficult before. This is really nice how we've made a lot of changes and updates in this in the last few years. And so that, and then when you're done, when you've entered in your last bird, you don't have to hit save or anything because it has saved every record as you go, which is also a feature of Access. It saves every record line. Once you've completed a line and moved to the next line, it has saved the previous line. So, which is great. Can also get you in trouble though if you're accidentally deleting stuff because if it saves that it's gone. But because we're not in the actual database and there's really no good way to delete anything from this interface, which we did on purpose. So if you accidentally enter a bird twice, which can certainly happen, let's say you did Violet Ground Swallow 15, Violet Ground Swallow 15, like, oh, I didn't need to put it twice. We don't have a way to delete it, and we did that on purpose because we don't want people to accidentally delete stuff. I can delete anything from the back end. So that'd be an example where you're like, oh, that record 232686, that's a double. I need you to delete that. That's no problem. It's easy for me to do, to go in there and delete it. So that's the basics of how data entry works. It is, I'm not teaching right now. I'm just doing this all online through that web interface of going to azIBA.org over to the database, and then that brings you right on in. And if you have a password, if you're logged in, which it is showing me as logged in with my username, then you can log yourself out too if you need to. But once you're logged in, you have all the power to do data entry. So I had a good question when we did this on Monday about how getting data forms to people would work, and I can do whatever works for people. So I always review data forms before I send them out to anybody. I look through them, make sure there's not like really weird mistakes or something. Or just don't write their names down, so I can look up who they were and put it in, that kind of thing. So I always review the data forms, and if something looks weird, but I think I understand it, but it's going to be strange, I'll sort of make it more clear in my red pen. And then in terms of getting them to people, sort of like those packets of paper data that needs to then be entered, first of all, also I want to point out, I always keep digital scans of anything that leaves my office. So data forms are going out, I do scan them first, just for safety in case I end up mailing them to you or something and they get lost in the mail or whatever. So I do keep this stuff, or if your dog eats it or something, I do keep digital scans of everything for safety. So just know that. But also, I'm happy to mail them to people, or I some of my volunteers who live near the Mason Center will come pick it up there, or if I want to pick it up at the nature shop or whatever, we can work it out. I'm happy. I so appreciate help getting data entered that I'll whatever people need to get the data packets to them and then back to me, because I do archive this stuff. But once data's been entered, if you noted, I have pointed out on the cover sheet, entered an online database at the very top right here, entered into the online database on date by name. So when you've entered it, you fill that out, and then you know it's been entering, and I do archive this stuff in my giant file cabinet. So that's sort of the basics of how the data entry works. And I just wanted to make sure that you guys have a good sense of that to see if you want to go ahead and actually move forward with this. So I will send this recording out to everybody. And I'll also send that question, do you want to move forward? And then we'll schedule a training. And I think what I'm going to do for the training is make sure everyone has sort of an actual paper packet. I'll probably mail them to you, like a paper sample packet for us to enter, we'll all log in type thing, and we'll enter data as part of like an actual training. Because there's things that it's extremely logical. And I also have a little sort of description form, like a typed up page on how to do this that I'll also share with you guys. That makes a lot more sense once you've done a training. But also when we do our training too, we'll record it too, and we'll have that video available for you guys if you need to review anything. But let's see, Taylor, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. I'm pretty much done with that. So if you want to cover your volunteer hours info.
Sure. So hi, hello. Thank you all so much for volunteering. We really appreciate it. As you can tell, Jenny has a very large task in front of her, so your help is really important. I am the volunteer and education manager, and as such, it is my job to bother you greatly in detail about logging your volunteer hours. Jen is laughing because I just spoke with her over the phone, so she knows. I really want to emphasize this. So Jenny is the person in charge of all details of the IBA program, training you, data, everything. She's the person with all of that information and knowledge and skill. My job is anything that has to do with logistics. So getting you all everything that you need, making sure you can log your hours, making sure you've signed all of the things you need to sign. And if you have general questions, if you ever can't reach Jenny and you're like, I can't do data and I can't find Jenny's email, or whatever the issue may be, you're always welcome to email me and I'll find the right person to pass that information along to. So in terms of logging volunteer hours, have either of you done this before? Yes. Okay, Laura, yes, you have. Okay. And Jenna, I believe I sent you the video on it. Did you have a chance to look at it? And it's okay if the answer is no.
Not yet, no.
That's totally fine. That's completely fine. Take a look. If you have questions, let me know. Laura, you've done it before. I believe I already have added both of you to the Important Bird Areas project, but that is the project you will log your hours under. One thing I forgot to mention to the previous group is that most of our IBA volunteers, we have fill out a Google form instead of log their hours through our official system. You all will go ahead and use our official system. The reason that there's a difference is because there's mileage and other things that we're asking the other IBA volunteers for, including demographic information. And that's right, Jenny.
Where
And
they
location.
survey. Game and Fish
Right.
wants that information for the people doing the bird surveys.
So it's just that we need more information from them than our system will allow us to collect. So that's why we're doing it. And it's a weird thing. We're doing it separately. So just in case you all ever do a survey, you're going to be asked to log hours a little bit differently. But that's the only thing that's weird. You all are logging hours the normal way. And I'll add you to the project, Important Bird Areas. And that should be about it. Again, Jenna, if you have questions and you try logging your hours and it doesn't work, or you have questions about it, please let me know. But otherwise you have materials. Laura, you're good. You've done it. It should be very similar. Just choose that as your project. And I just want to emphasize to do it. Please round. I guess if you want to put 2.17 hours, you're more than welcome to, but I really don't need that level of detail or fineness. And you can log as often or as you want, like as soon as you're done with something. If you want to, I do data entry. Actually, I volunteer elsewhere doing data entry. So when I finish, as soon as I'm done with data entry, I just log my hours so I don't forget them. But if what works better for you is to log it once a month, that's fine. As long as we have it on that level of this month, Laura entered data for IBA for 4 hours, and that's in the month of February, that's fine. I think that's all I really have. You should both have my email. If not, I'll put it in the chat. That's all I have. Thank you all very much. Do you have questions?
Oh, Laura, we can't hear you.
Oh, Laura, you're muted, Laura.
There you go.
For logging hours, we're not logging today's session, are we?
I think you should.
I think you should. Yeah, because this
Absolutely.
is time out of your day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Training counts for sure. That's a good question. When you're training with Jenny on like actually doing the training, anything that you are doing that benefits us in some way, and you being trained benefits us that you would not normally be doing, absolutely counts as volunteering. Good question.
Okay.
So we track all this really carefully with volunteer hours, because one, it's so impressive to see how much time that the amazing volunteers at Just Audubon give to the organization and give to the mission. But for the IBA program, it's very, very important because our main funder is Arizona Game and Fish, and they take some of their federal funding that they get for non-game bird conservation. They turn around, they fund our program, which means they then have to report what happened with that money back to the federal government. So we give them very detailed reports on what we did and how many people helped and how many hours they helped and all that. And then they turn around and give that to the federal government to justify, you know, that money that they used for bird conservation. So, and it's interesting how Game and Fish does this because they want a pretty detailed report on where everybody went. Now, for data entry, that's not the thing. It's the fact that the hours were done doing data entry. But when I send people up to, you know, the Santa Rita Mountains versus the Chiricahua Mountains, for some reason, Game and Fish doesn't want to know that. So that's why we keep it in a separate online logging system. But interestingly, Game and Fish assigns dollar values to people's volunteer time. And when I do my reports at the end of every fiscal year, and I sort of have this really detailed report of, okay, at this location, I had these people, they did this many hours hiking in this area, looking for trogons or whatever. It assigns, because it's a bird surveyor role is assigned at a certain dollar value, but data entry is actually assigned at a higher value. So your guys' volunteer hours are actually valued more per hour by the federal government than people actually running around chasing birds. So I always thought that was kind of a fun, whenever I'm doing data entry or training data entry, I'm like, oh, more valuable. Literally, monetarily, I guess, in the eyes of everybody, Game and Fish, literally more valuable. So that was kind of always a fun little detail. But that is any other questions? Okay, so I'll be sending a follow-up on who wants to move forward with the training, and then we'll schedule a training with everyone. All right, great. Thank you all so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all.